Hello, welcome back. This is What If Civilization Started Over, and this is the prequel part, how it ends, part 2. So basically when we left off in the year 2052, it wasn't looking too good because a nuclear winter was beginning to set in, World War III just happened, a lot of people in the Northern Hemisphere died, the populations of the countries in the war in total were around 2 billion beforehand. After, it's now around 100 million of all of those countries combined. Plus, the countries have completely collapsed. It's basically just people running around. And where did a lot of those people go? South. Chile, Argentina, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand all began to push out anyone who tried to enter their countries because they had a lot of food supplies, because they were in the right area to be able to grow a lot of food. So they just took all of it and kept it with themselves. This event proved detrimental to a lot of people, basically everybody. Southern Asia couldn't survive because it didn't have enough food. Basically only India and Pakistan were able to survive. And places like the Sahara Desert didn't have any fertile land, and without those inputs, those countries basically collapsed on day one. And over in northern South America, there was a lot of starvation and a lot of people began to die, and the countries began to fall into chaos. By the year 2065, the thing finally ended, and after that, things began to settle down, but a lot of countries didn't make it through. Northern South America didn't make it through. A lot of Africa didn't make it through. All of Northern Africa didn't make it through. And most of Asia didn't make it through. So there wasn't much left. And the colors in gray are things with groups that are reasonably sized within 100,000 or 10,000 to 100,000, but everything else is with groups very small, just a few hundred survivors at most, trying to survive. Let's go over to India and see what's going on over there. Not good. Half of India was lost because India just couldn't hold on to that territory anymore. It was running out of money, resources, food, so it just said, let's cut our losses and just hang on to our central part, our own industrialized part. And then Pakistan saw this and said this would be a good chance to invade and, finally defeat their rivals at the weakened state. So they also wanted to be the only superpower left because there was no other superpowers other than them, India, and a few other kind of superpowers, but nobody else had nuclear weapons. Pakistan launched all its nuclear weapons at major Indian population centers, and in retaliation, India launched all of their nuclear weapons at major Pakistanian centers or population centers, and because of that, around 30 million people died within hours, and not quite a nuclear winter, but a nuclear fall set in afterwards. But the two sides began to fight after that. The two sides then began hitting each other with everything they had. First was Pakistan. They tried to get the war over with quickly and quickly wipe out India with a huge invasion. But India, with a lot of casualties, was still able to push back and defend. Then they turned back to Pakistan and tried their own invasion. But like before, Pakistan was able to defend, and India was sent back. It was a stalemate. Soldiers were being thrown at each other, and no one was winning. The best idea was just hold out as long as possible and hope the other side loses first. Because of this, around 50 million more people died through the ensuing famine and the war, and that's just in the first year. By year 2, around 100 million people died. And at this point, both sides were on the brink of collapse. And by year 3, India finally fractured and fell. But that's not all, because Pakistan wasn't doing any better. And not too long after, it itself collapsed. So there wasn't really any real winners to the war. That all happened around the year 2070, and after that, a few things of importance happened. One being the splitting of Australia into 3 separate countries, kind of like southwest country, a northeast country, and kind of like a central country. And because of that, New Zealand also split, and the Northern Ireland got its independence, and the Southern Ireland got its independence. Over in Africa, the 3 countries in there that kind of ate up everything else were kind of just staring at each other in a standoff, like waiting for who was going to make the first move in a war. And over in South America, it was not going too well. Brazil collapsed. First, its northern half fell out into anarchy, and then part of its southern half was taken by its neighbors. And then there was the rise of the Latin American Empire, which also did some damage. Things are actually kind of looking up for civilization at this time. They're beginning to kind of bounce back, but it's about to get a whole lot worse because of the Telegian virus that emerges in 2120. The Telegian virus was extremely deadly. It had like a 90% fatality rate if you got infected, and it was also extremely infectious. Like, if you were to stand within 5 feet of someone who was infected for like 30 minutes, there's already like a 50% chance of being infected. So it was pretty bad. This virus would have already been extremely deadly, but its timing made it even worse because the Latin American Empire and Argentina at the time were at war. They were fighting over who would be the dominant superpower in the area. But this caused an issue. It was a close war that the Latin American Empire won, but they didn't take much land, so not much came from it. Except for the fact that the virus, people who were out fighting got sick. They went home, they hung out with their families, they may have held a party or celebrating that they survived the war, and then that would get more people sick. And because of that, they would then leave and get more people sick. And more people would get sick. And within a month, a across all of the Latin American empire had started. Within 3 months, it had already spread to all of South America. But it wasn't done yet, because part of the reason why it had so bad timing was because there was a war going on in southern Africa. The Tanzanian Empire, the South African Empire, and the Ethiopian Empire were at war. They all were at war with each other, all trying to triumph over the other and become the dominant power in Africa. And because of this, when the virus eventually inevitably spread to Africa, it made it so it spread similarly to how it spread in South America. And because of this, in a few months, it was all over South Africa, Southern Africa too. A ceasefire was put out between the three sides because they wanted to wait for the virus to be over. But the damage has already been done. Already by 2121, around 10 million people were dead, and the numbers were quickly rising. And it was only a matter of time until the virus hit the continent of Oceania, and it would get bad from there. And later that year, it did. It hit the continent, and for Australia, it was detrimental, but for New Zealand, it was even worse, and the two countries on the New Zealand territory both collapsed pretty shortly after. By 2123, around 50 million people had already died, and the numbers were still rising. It was not looking good, and unless if something happened quickly, humanity could definitely collapse. The country of South Africa collapsed, followed by the Latin American Empire, and then the two of the three countries in Australia, except for the big farming one. By 2130, the virus hit its peak, and with over 100 million people dead and millions more sick, it was not too long after that most of the remaining countries collapsed. First, it was Argentina, followed shortly after by Chile, and then Uruguay. After that, it was Tanzania, and then it was Central Australia was the last to fall, but eventually it fell too. And with that, all of the modern countries have fallen, and the world has finally completely collapsed. If you enjoyed that video, please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps me out, but you don't need to. Thank you. And with that, I'll see you next time. Have a great day, and goodbye.